The NDP have wrapped up their annual convention in Victoria, and Premier David Eby's leadership review dominated the headlines for the three-day gathering. Missing, though, from the conversation about the convention agenda, the environment and climate change, almost no talk of that. Well, to break it all down, we've got our weekly political panel with us on the early edition. Emily Lowan is the leader of the BC Green Party. Moe Sihota is a former BC NDP cabinet minister, currently runs his own lobbying company, LNG, among his clients. And Rachael Segal is a former senior director of the BC Liberal Party and Vice President and BC Lead for Enterprise Canada. Good morning to all three of you.
Good morning, Stephen.
Great to have you all aboard this morning. Moe, David Eby survived his leadership review with, 82% of members. That would be the 743 delegates. 2 years ago, he had 93% membership supporting his leadership. What do you make of Eby's support this time around?
Well, it's pretty good. I remind you that John Horgan and I got about 80% or 83% one of the years as well. So these things oscillate. I'm not a big fan of polls, but particularly horse race numbers. But it is interesting. If you go back to 2020, there's been 12 quarters since then. And in each one of those quarters, the NDP has been above 42% in every poll that's happened. I've never seen in 50 years of looking at polls that level of consistency. David Eby's approval ratings a year ago were at 47%. This year, last poll that came out, they're still at 47%. I think it's really important when you take a look at what's going on out there to recognize that slowly but steadily, since about 2015, the NDP has kind of become BC's big tent party. The last few polls I looked at show that 74% of federal Liberal voters vote NDP. That's never happened before. That type of consistency has been there since about 2015. And Stephen, as you recall, back in the 1990s when I was in office, the province tended to tilt center-right. Mm-hmm. It's clearly started to tilt center-left, and there's just a whole new coalition that's out there. Eby, I think, is seen as being competent by the public at large. He's working hard to protect paychecks, to make BC the new engine of the economy, create high-paying jobs, protect healthcare, and bring about prosperity for businesses and families. We just saw going into the convention that the federal government approved yet another major project for British Columbia, in this case, a transmission line. And you remember, we're only one of 10 provinces, and yet 40% of the new major projects are now allocated to British Columbia, 3 LNG facilities and 5 mines, including also 9 wind power projects. And finally, I think it's important to know that because the economy is top of mind, we're dealing with Trump's tariffs. BC's exports to the United States account for about 54% of our economic activity. That's the best record in Canada. Ontario, by comparison, has 82% of its exports going to the south. The reason why I mention that is that I think Eby is right to be focusing on the economy and trying to diversify our trade relationships with other jurisdictions. Ravi Parmar, our Minister of Forests, last week, and probably the most underreported story of the week, was in Korea and Japan identifying new market opportunities for our beleaguered forestry sector. So when you take a look at the end of the day, David Eby is sort of seen as steady, competent, capable, both within the party and the public at large.
Rachael, do you think the outcome of David Eby's leadership review, or the confidence that's been expressed by the party, do you think that resonates with the general public? Do you think that kind of confidence is there in a wider way?
No, that's exactly what I was about to dive into. And it sounds like Moe is fresh off the NDP convention, where it was a bit more Instagram versus reality situation. The good vibes were flowing over the weekend, and these party conventions are awesome. I mean, it's a big family reunion. And from everything I've heard, I wasn't there, full disclosure, but from everything I've heard, this was a really friendly couple of days. The thing is, there is the party convention and the leadership race and the 700 people that voted in that leadership race. And then there is the general election. And that's potentially 5 million British Columbians. And so, this was a great result for David Eby, something that I didn't even anticipate that he would get, because it's almost mind-boggling based on a lot of the decisions that he's made over the last few years and some of the internal policies within the party. So things like you talked about, Stephen, environmental policies that he has changed his position on, decriminalization, labor issues, BCGEU, BC ferries, involuntary care, where he flip-flopped on that in the last 2 years. So, 700 people decided that he got that percentage in his leadership. But there's 5 million British Columbians that are struggling in this province each day with record generational deficit. Mo talked about the forestry sector. We saw massive cuts in 100 Mile House 2 weeks ago that Ravi Parmar should have been talking about. We saw the ferry contract go to a country that we've had diplomatic issues with. We saw labor jobs go overseas instead of in Canada. The extortion crisis, which we talk about every week, is just on the rise. Property rights are being questioned after the Cowichan decision. The BCGEU strike impacted so many public servants in the province. So if you went to the polls today, would the province give David Eby that percentage? I highly doubt it.
Emily, the two main parties seem to be dealing with questions about the popularity of their own leaders, certainly is the case with the Conservatives and John Rustad. And again, internally, David Eby's popular, but Rachel raises some good questions. How well, Emily, do you think the legislature is functioning currently?
I think they're on a real tightrope. And I think when we look at the NDP convention and reflect on the weekend, as Rachel said, 7% of the BC NDP chose to vote and participate in this AGM. And, behind the closed doors of an AGM with a whipped caucus at David Eby's side, he garners high approval ratings. But in the real world, he's getting failing grades from British Columbians. And Rustad's leadership appears to be a week-to-week miracle of survival with an endless barrage of scandals. But I'm happy to report that the BC Greens also had a successful convention over the weekend, and I think that's particularly reflective in our membership numbers. Well, the BC NDP has been hemorrhaging members and grassroots supporters, particularly since 2022 after the ejection of Angelia Potterai. The BC Greens, under my leadership, have grown our ranks by 65%, adding 3,500 new members over just the past few months. So we now have more members than the official opposition and are closely following the NDP. One of the highlights from the weekend was a landmark motion to stand against apartheid and genocide here in BC and around the world. So we are now the only anti-genocide party in BC. So it feels like we're building a truly intergenerational working class movement of people who are excited about BC's future, whereas the NDP continue to abandon their working class base.
Mo, back to you. The BC NDP's faced a lot of criticism since the last convention. Rachel pointed some of that out a moment ago. There's been labor unrest. There's a record deficit. Yeah. There are concerns about environmental policies or a lack of attention to environmental policies. What do you think the mood is among rank-and-file NDP members right now?
Well, I think, look, everybody understands that we are in difficult times between the tariffs, the climate crisis, healthcare affordability. And, the challenge of government, and I've been in government, is that you're constantly dealing with issues. And it's just not a perfect world. And you don't have a situation where you don't have to deal with anything. There's stuff that's going to happen. Who would have thought a year ago that we would be dealing with extortion to the degree that we are? That doesn't mean that government plays ostrich to them. It means that they deal with the issues that arise. And the reason why political parties do well or can weather these storms of ongoing issues is because people look at the leader and they look at the party and they say, okay, well, who's competent? And clearly, when you compare the political landscape in British Columbia right now, people believe that David Eby is best equipped to deal with all of these issues. I don't want to belabor the point, but we know that the Conservatives have problems. It's not just John Restad; it's the entirety of their party. They have diametrically opposed views, and they can't function as a group. To some degree, that helps out the NDP. But as I said earlier on, its polling numbers have been very, very steady for quite some time. So David Eby is in a little bit a situation like John Horgan. John Horgan never really expected to have to deal with COVID. David Eby never really expected to deal with Trump's tariffs. But having said that, the approach that he's taking to rebuild and diversify British Columbia's economy gives people some level of hope that there's going to be prosperity. He hasn't engaged in heavy cuts to healthcare, which is what the Conservatives would want. What he's done instead is try to make sure that we remain competitive. We have the lowest tax rate for people earning less than $150,000 a year, and our small business tax rate in British Columbia has dropped by 44% since we've been in office to try to continue to attract investment. We're seeing investment come in, like I said earlier on, both LNG, wind projects, and the like. So on balance, what you have to demonstrate to the public is that the people are coming at you from all different directions, and you are trying to deal with things from some sense of balance and competence. The Greens will always say that we're not green enough, and the Conservatives will always say that we're too green. The trick of the matter and what David Eby is doing is to strike a balance between building and rebuilding a strong economy in British Columbia while maintaining a strong ethic, and he's doing just that.
Rachel, how effective is the Conservative opposition right now? I mean, they have been dealing with, a lot of infighting and people walking away and people being, essentially dismissed from the party. Do we have an effective opposition right now in this province?
Absolutely. I would actually argue, Stephen, that we have one of the most effective oppositions if you look at the last 12 months. I mean, nobody is saying there are not issues within the caucus, with the leadership right now, but John Rustad has said he is going to stay there. He is going to work to regain the trust of his caucus. That's what he's been doing. But when you talk about any political party, and I think Moe should be doing the NDP ads because that was such a nice, warm-hearted description of what's happening in the province and especially with the NDP. Again, David Eby has David Eby has made so many decisions that are creating fractures within his own caucus. You've pointed out many times environmental policies, his temporary foreign worker position aligning with Pierre Poilievre on that. We saw him flip-flop on involuntary care and decriminalization. Like, these are issues that are at the base, at the heart of the NDP. And I think the thing that Moe talks about in terms of the public is that government deals with issues as they come up. The issue is that the NDP have degraded the trust they have with British Columbians in being able to thoughtfully and effectively deal with those issues. We have seen things like the extortion crisis, where people are saying they don't feel safe in this province. We have seen other issues come up that British Columbians are feeling like this government is not competent to deal with. And that is the problem. It's hard to govern, and the NDP government over the last few years has not made British Columbians, especially under David Eby, feel like they are have the ability to actually deal with major crises. Instead, what we're seeing is them running generational deficits. And when Moe talks about big projects, when we see that list from the Prime Minister, we think, how much is this going to cost me as a taxpayer in British Columbia? Because things like the BC Hydro line, which the federal government put in I don't know the exact number, but like $1.9 million, is going to cost, according to the NDP, $10 billion to build. Where does that money come from? It's British Columbians.
We are going to have to leave it there this morning. Thank you all, and we will talk again next week.
Thanks.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rachael Segal, former Senior Director of the BC Liberal Party and Vice President and BC Lead for Enterprise Canada. Emily Lowan, the leader of the BC Green Party. Moe Sihota, former BC NDP Cabinet Minister, currently operates his own lobbying company.